traveling to Northeast Syria, our delegation was aware of at least 9 Canadian men who are reportedly held in prisons in the region, who have been detained for many years without charge or trial, without contact or communication with their families, without access to lawyers, and who are not receiving consular visits. A top priority, therefore, during our visit was to be granted access to these men. In many cases, there has not even been clear confirmation through what is often termed proof of life that they are even still alive for several years. In the end, we were able to visit with 2 of the men held in different prisons on the last day of our visit. And we received considerable assistance from officials with the autonomous administration in making those arrangements, which we deeply appreciate. We were and remain very disappointed and concerned that we did not obtain access to the other men. We met with Mohammed Ali and Jack Letts. Both men also shared with us that they face serious health concerns. Mohammed Ali did not, however, feel able to share further details, given that our interview, by necessity, was conducted with prison officials present. They have both been held for over 5 years. They have not been charged in Northeast Syria or brought before a judge or tribunal, nor have there been any steps taken towards repatriating, extraditing, or deporting them to face charges and a trial in another country. Neither man, to their knowledge, has received a visit from a Canadian delegation or representative in that time. As Senator Pate indicates, they've been questioned repeatedly by security officials from other countries, most frequently by the FBI. Mohammed Ali indicated he believes he's been questioned 25 times by the FBI, but none of that has led to any legal proceedings being taken against them either. Instead, they languish, warehoused with thousands of other foreign nationals in detention centers across the region, held beyond the reach of law, far from outside scrutiny, in a detention regime that is devoid of any sense of accountability, and in which human rights violations are unsurprisingly rampant. So today we are unequivocal in calling for the Canadian government to act immediately on 2 justice fronts. Seek the repatriation of all Canadian men held in detention centres in Northeast Syria, with a commitment to pursue fair proceedings in Canada if there is evidence any of them have committed terrorism-related or other criminal acts. And secondly, work with the international community and ANIS to develop and provide the necessary resources to support a comprehensive approach to ensuring justice and accountability for all Syrian and foreign detainees held in Northeast Syria that is consistent with international human rights obligations. I think we have to stay away from this idea that there's one narrative about why any of those men, and similarly any of the women, ended up in Syria. I think it's easy to paint them as the worst possible and imagine this was a deliberate, voluntary journey to go join Daesh and commit terrible atrocities. I think we need to realize so if we've got 9 Canadian men, there's 9 different stories as to what led them there. Some of which may, yes, be the basis for criminal charges, others absolutely not. So I think that's the first thing to recognize. Secondly, when it comes to issues around the cost of doing so, yes, justice and human rights costs money. And we're not disinterested parties to what has happened and what continues to happen there, including because Canadian citizens are involved, but also because the Canadian government, in direct and indirect roles, Canadian security forces, have played a role in the effort to defeat ISIS. We didn't stand back and just leave it in the hands of others. We're part of that incredibly important effort. It's a global effort such that a well-established global coalition against Daesh has been established. Canada is an active participant in that. There's every reason that Canada needs to therefore live up to our responsibilities and our ability to ensure that that certainly the 9 men were concerned about, but more widely, that the response that is so urgently needed now to the insecurity, but also right now the impunity issues associated with those horrific years of ISIS control are dealt with in a way that respects and upholds human rights. This task it would be an understatement to say it's mammoth. Around 30 judges in that court, 4,000 to 5,000 foreign nationals who they envision putting through trials. Just start to try to do the calculus as to how long that would take in a Canadian context. And they're committed to fair trial standards. They're committed to ensuring that those who wish to be represented by defense counsel of their own choice can do so. So it's almost impossible to imagine that this is remotely viable in a way that doesn't begin to stretch out for decades. And thus all sorts of fair trial and human rights concerns that will begin to emerge immediately along the way. The responsible thing, therefore, for governments like Canada to do is to at least try to ease the load and ease the burden by living up to our part of the responsibility to repatriate the Canadians who are there. It's not a huge contribution, 9 Canadians in 4,000 to 5,000, but perhaps if we did so, that would serve as an example for other states to do similarly. Doing so with a commitment to ensure that if there is evidence that bears it out, we will follow up on justice and accountability, and that perhaps begins to make the caseload left in Syria more manageable. So, our visit does make it clear that access is possible, that there is and can be cooperation with local officials, and so we certainly hope that following up on that, the Canadian government will pull out all the stops to get consular officers in immediately.